Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me today is Abby from Life Work Balance and Ronan from Career Coach Ronan Kennedy. So, hello to everybody.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, this is very, very informal. We are going to be talking about job search, and the topic today is how recruiters process job applications. So, this is hopefully a bit of an insight for candidates or for people that are looking for a job right now, applying to places. If you have never been on the other side of the table, you don't really see where your job application goes, how it's looked at, what are the steps, who looks at it, and what goes on, how the decisions are made. That's what hopefully we're going to be getting into today. I think all three of us have had some involvement to varying degrees in that process in the past. And so we're going to sort of talk about our experiences, talk about when we were doing this and what we know about the how it's done, not necessarily what we did, but also how it's done in other places in the world at large, and shed some light on this so that job seekers understand what happens and that can help them to tailor what they do to be more effective. So that's basically what we're going to be covering. So I don't know if anyone wants to kick this off. We haven't really discussed what the structure is, but someone sends in a job application. What happens to it? Maybe Ronan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll kick off. Yeah, I'll kick off. Well, I think if you empathize with the recruiter, right, you put yourself in their shoes. What are they thinking? Well, they're trying to hire the right candidates, as many correct candidates as possible, so that they can do the best service for the company they're working for and the best service for the candidate. Now, if they get 50 or 100 or 200 applications for only one position, imagine you're in their situation. What do you want to do? Well, I think a lot of the time you want to try cut down those applications to the smallest number that are relevant as soon as possible. How do you do that? You do that by identifying the keywords that resonate with the requirements on the job description. So that's why it's so important that people have meaningful keywords written into their CV. When I say meaningful, I mean they're connected to sentences, they make sense, they're part of your experience, they're part of your professional summary, and that it's not just keyword stuffing that people where they just jam loads of keywords into CV and fingers crossed that it actually works and makes sense. So it's putting meaningful key terms and phrases into the CV so the recruiter can see, yes, this person meets the basic requirements. So I can now keep them in the to review and interview pile as opposed to putting them into the trash. So I think that's the first.
Piles? Sorry, do people still have piles? Like you're talking about piles? Is that like a pile of resumes? Do people still do that, or that's like a thing of the past?
Yeah, maybe instead of piles, it's files, right? So files on the computer as opposed to stacks of paper. So I think that's the first key thing to keep in mind. Now, in my opinion, and maybe Abby has and Bill, you have a different perspective on this, but I would imagine it's seconds, like less than 10 seconds to make a clear decision on whether this person should stay in the maybe pile or go into the bin.
There was actually eye tracking research done on that exact topic when it comes to the resume reviews, which is 6 seconds. So on the first time someone looks at a resume, they spend 6 seconds to make the decision of fit or not fit. Yeah. And so that's, there are other aspects of the recruiting process that they might be looking into as well. But when they pull up your resume, 6 seconds is what you got to really make that point that you're a good fit for the role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, like, you've never been on the other side of the table, so you don't understand what it's like. Like if you had posted a job and you got applications and you got, say, 200 applicants, if this was a one-time only thing in your life, maybe conceivably you might look at all 200 resumes. I mean, how long would it take you to look at 200 pieces of paper? Like, somebody mentioned like a few seconds, like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, like that's multiplied by 200, multiplied by, all the shoveling around of papers and opening and closing of files. That's a long time. That's like an hour or something to do that easy.
100%. And also you have to take into account decision fatigue or any sort of like difficulty in reading or understanding. Like, we also know that there's research that if you have a document that has small font, or it's complicated to read, or it's difficult to understand, just complicated to read because of the words or the phrase, or it's difficult because of the phrasing or the colors or anything like that, you're way less likely to actually engage with it, because why would you? You've got 200 other well-written applications in front of
if
you.
anything's hard to read or anything's a little bit confusing, you're not going to like, wait a minute, go back and reread it and put effort and thinking work into, deciphering it. Not to mention, like, we're talking about how long it takes to look at it, a few seconds. But then you've got to like decide, okay, should this go in the retain pile or the top of the, the good pile, or is this a bad pile? And then you have to classify it and then sort it, right? Like, so for each one, there's all those activities too. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is actually a very labor intensive process. It's a lot longer than people would think. And that's if you have 200 applications. Is that typical? I get the impression that people are pushing 1,000 for a lot of jobs and stuff that are online now.
Well,
you get 1,000,
One of the things Ronan said at the very beginning was like having empathy for the recruiter. So the recruiter might have, let's just use your number of 200 applications for one job. There probably are also hiring for multiple jobs. So I might have 200 applications for this job, and I might have 1,000 for this other one. I might have 10 for another one. But most recruiters will have a caseload where they are hiring to fill multiple positions simultaneously. So it's all of these pieces for just one job times whatever their caseload looks like.
Yeah, that's a great point, Abby. It's like, this is just one of the things they're working on. So, you're doing like, it multiplies so many times that you can see kind of the perspective of the recruiter. Like, they don't have a lot of time, and they don't have a lot of leeway to be able to really devote a lot of effort, either time wise or thinking wise, analysis wise, into looking at each application. Obviously, this is why people are turning to ATS increasingly. I would assume that most jobs now, that you see posted on the internet, it's all initially filtered by some type of ATS system. Like, that's the first thing that's going to be looking at your resume or your application once you send it. And it's not going to be human. It's going to be a computer first, right?
Yeah, but think about the ATS. So people say, well, I need to make sure my CV is ready for the ATS, but the ATS is just going to replicate what the human would do faster. It's still going to look for meaningful keywords as part of meaningful phrases and sentences. So the approach is the same. You got to make it meaningful. You got to tailor it to the requirements. And if you think someone only has 6 seconds, or an ATS is just going to scan your whole CV, it answers all those other questions, like, how long should the CV be? Should I add this extra stuff in there? What should I put in the first 5 or 6 sentences? Well, it should all be high quality, meaningful stuff. And you should only say things that you really want people to read and pick up on. And the more specific you are, the better it's going to come across. Because if it's just loads of generic stuff, the ATS or the human is still not going to be able to glean anything useful from compared to something that's super specific and detailed.
Yes. Well, and one of the notes that I wrote down was like the different types of recruiters that there are. And there might be an internal recruiter versus an external recruiter. So an internal recruiter might be someone who works for HR, who is an HR generalist, who is assigned to a client, someone else in their department to hire for. Or there's an external recruiter, which is like a recruiting agency. Their processes are probably slightly different. So those are the other things we have to look for. There's maybe a technical recruiter versus a general recruiter. A technical recruiter might be someone who has done the work before and knows exactly what it's like to go into this job, versus a general recruiter might be that HR person who doesn't have any experience doing the work, but knows based off of their conversations with the hiring manager what type of work is, minimum versus preferred qualifications. And then you have like the active versus passive recruiters. Your active recruiters are the headhunters. They're the people who are looking through LinkedIn, reaching out to people, actively asking them to apply to these jobs. Whereas the passive ones, again, might be that HR person who's just more passively looking at applications that come through the applicant tracking system. So it also takes some analysis on the candidate's side to decide who they're going to be, pitching to with this first application, who might see it. I might have a general, passive recruiter in HR who's going to review the application, but then it's going to get sent to the hiring manager. So I can't just throw my materials together quickly in a willy-nilly random way and expect to get results. We have to be very intentional and specific with how we put together our documents, the words that we use in our resumes, if we include a cover letter or not, if we're going to upload any supplemental materials and documents, how we answer the questions, if there are questions as a part of the application process. So I find that most people struggle with this when they're trying to get applications cranked out and they're not putting effort into and quality into their applications. They're more focused on quantity.
That's a great point, like how it goes to different people depending on the application, who their role is different, their background is different, and their goals are different. So what they're looking at and what they're doing are going to be different. Ronan mentioned AI and stuff, or mentioned ATS earlier, and I was going to make the point that when ATS came out, it was kind of pretty dumb, and it was just looking for keywords, and almost like a Word document. You do Control F, like find on page, look for that word, how many instances of that word, that kind of thing. What I believe is going on now is that AI is being incorporated into the ATS system. So it's almost like having ChatGPT scan your resume. So it understands sentences. It's not just looking for words. So if you take say the first requirement was, law degree. So on your resume, you name drop law degree like 60 times on the first page of your resume. Now the ATS is smarter. It knows okay, you're saying law degree, but there's no intelligence there. There's no sentences or accomplishments or anything that makes sense to do with a law degree. So it can start to see through some of that stuff. I mean, is that you guys' experience? Have you seen that? I've kind of been out of the game for a while, so I haven't seen the incorporation of AI into ATS, but I understand that's what's going on now.
Yeah, what's interesting, it's on both sides now. You've got these CV software packages that are incorporating AI and ChatGPT on the front end. So as you're designing it, it's prompting you to write correct sentences. It's prompting you to add metrics. It's prompting you to add more detail because it's responding to the AI on the other side, right? So it's just better tools on both sides. That's what I've seen of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get AI to write my cover letter so I can fool the AI on the other end.
Yeah,
I'm way more qualified than I actually am. Yeah, exactly. Ultimately that will be self-defeating, but that is kind of what is going on. It works, I think, because you still get some candidates that are not using these tools or these techniques. So you're beating them. You're not really beating the AI on the receiving end, but you're just maneuvering your competitors.
It's like any tool. When any tool gets good, the function of any tool is the person using the tool, right? So if the person is better at using the tool is going to perform better. So the problem with AI at the moment, AI is obviously magical, but the only problem we have is that it goes more to generic things because it's trying to round things off compared to being specific. And think about what we say as coaches or recruiters. We're all about helping people talk about the unique selling points. What's special about you? Why should they choose you above someone else? And so if AI is making everything generic, that doesn't work. It's good if it helps them add in the keywords and add in those extra phrases. And maybe if somebody struggles with writing or talking about themselves, they can kind of coach them through it or help them a little bit. But you want to go specific, not generic.
Yes. And AI gets you its average, right? It's an average of all the data that it has. So you want to use it as your first draft, and then you really want to bolster it with your own, specific experience and metrics and all the things that you have in your documents. And I think when it comes to the recruitment process with applicant tracking systems, I think the applicant tracking systems that are a little bit more intelligent still give you a very general output and overview of how good of a fit this person might be. The ones that I've used have not been that smart. They require people to answer questions, and then they give you scores based off how they answer those questions. And those questions are multiple choice. So an example would say, how many years of experience do you have in this specific setting? 5 or more, 3 or more, 2 or more, 0 experience. And based on what they click in.
People are puzzled on how to game that system. Yeah.
Yes. And as a recruiter, I'll look at those scores. I'll initially sort people who score 70% or better on the total output. And then I'll look for the people who scored 100%. And I'm suspicious about them because I'm thinking they're gaming the system. And I'll then do a little bit more of a deeper dive into their documents, because they might be a unicorn that actually exists for the specific role. But in most cases, people are overinflating their responses.
But this is the, like, it's great that you said that, Ab, because as from my perspective, this is where you get to the heart of the matter, where, like, you know, the conventional wisdom is like, okay, you know, use keywords, give, you know, when you write a cover letter, do this technique, you know, the standard thing, right? And then it comes up, well, if you're going in with 1,000 other people that are all doing the standard average thing, how do you elevate yourself above the crowd? You have to have more uniqueness, more individuality, that kind of thing, right? Now, I have a bit of a full disclosure. I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder because many years ago, when I was, you know, on the other side of the table and I was a candidate and I was going for stuff, I had a few experiences where I came up against recruiters where I felt I was, like, you know, really offering some unique combinations of skills and things that nobody else had. And because it wasn't a standard thing, a lot of times it really felt like it counted against me. They say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, you don't have this, like the most mundane thing. And it's like, well, no, you don't get it. I've gone so far beyond that, you know? And then it results, the end result is that, like, a lot of people think, well, yes, I could put a lot of uniqueness and stuff on there. But if you're going through an ATS system or you're going through a recruiter that's sorting through 1,000 resumes, they're looking for key things. And if you start talking all about all these other things that they're not really looking for, it counts against you. It dilutes. You know, I was looking for these 5 things, and, you know, you have 4 of them, but then you have 30 other things that I don't understand. I'm not looking for. And then it counts against you. And this is the dilemma at the end of the day. I feel that's just my perspective on it. I don't know what you guys think of any of that.
And what do you think, Ronan?
What's the dilemma?
Well, the dilemma is, okay, if people are looking for a standard thing, there's a temptation to, and there's you have a lot of competitors. So the recommendation is you give the recruiter what they want by emphasizing the fact that you've got those standard things. But the problem is, with the increasing number of competitors you have, you want to stand out from the crowd, and you do that by doing the opposite, by giving unique things under the theory that will distinguish you. But that is not necessarily true. It might distinguish you, but you still don't have the things in the from the perspective of the recruiter that they're looking for.
Yeah. So can you have the standard things plus the extra things? You know, can you have the cake with the cherry on top? So if the recruiter is looking for cake, you're saying, yeah, I've got a cake and I've got the cherry on top. I've got a project management experience across 3 different industries. And I have experience managing a project which was an event. The event is the cherry on top. So, yeah, I wouldn't see that as a dilemma as such.
Well, the problem though is the recruiter then turns around and says, "I'm sorry, it's great that you've got a project management experience across 3 industries, but we're in this industry, and I'm looking for someone who's got more experience in this industry. So I'm sorry, that counts against you." You know what I'm saying? It's always a double-edged sword, where having something unique or some combination is like, yeah, that's great, but I don't value diversity of experiences. I value a depth skill set in this one precise area that I'm looking for.
So that's a great question, right? So then you say to the recruiter, why don't you value diversity of experience?
But you don't have a chance to have this debate usually, because it's done by them looking at your resume, and you're not present, and you don't understand how they're judging you. And you don't have the opportunity to make a counter argument, at least from my perspective.
So it comes like it. Sorry, Abby, after you.
I was going to say, I think that when it comes,
just butt in, Abby. Just butt right in. Come on. It doesn't matter if Ronan and me are both talking. You talk over top of us. That's how I want to do this.
So when it comes to applying to jobs, you have to have the minimum qualifications, and then you also want some of the preferred qualifications. That's what the recruiter is going to be looking for at first. Now, if you have all of the minimum qualifications, but none of the preferred qualifications, you're going to be put in the to be evaluated, but probably evaluated last if I can't find someone who fits what I'm looking for. But if you have the preferred qualifications, and then you can describe in your application package how those other things that are the fluff and the cherry on top make you a more qualified candidate to do this role, that's what gets the recruiters like eye caught. If I have someone who has some of these preferred qualifications, they have all the minimum qualifications, and then they talk about these other things that they've done, but they don't connect it back to the role, that's where I'm going to say you're not the right fit for this. Because we have to think, like, what is the recruiter's job when it comes to hiring for this role? Well, it's to find someone who can do the job. It's also to find someone who's going to be a good cultural fit for the team based on how they've interviewed the hiring manager. There's going to be someone who brings in maybe a different perspective or diversity of thought, and understanding what that diversity of thought that the hiring team is looking for that we can't necessarily put into words on the job posting. And so the recruiter is making all of these decisions and assumptions based off of what candidates include or don't include on their application. So let's say that I have project management experience, and one of those projects that I'm going to say is event planning, but that's not a part of the job that I'm applying to. I can still stand out to the recruiter by demonstrating through those transferable skills of like wording my bullet points a certain way and including a cover letter that gives a little bit more detail about how that experience is relevant to the job that I'm applying to. But as a candidate, I have to really put in the effort to separate myself out and show how this additional experience that might not be word for word what they're looking for on the job posting sets me up to be the best fit for this role.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that certainly makes sense. And I think one of the themes I think we're going to find today, you guys can tell me what you think, is that everything works some of the time, and like you could apply a certain logic or a certain methodology and you will find that sometimes. Sometimes you will find the opposite. And what like, this is the element of sort of uncertainty, like just almost statistical probability. Some recruiters will, you will be able to make a case and make a logical, persuasive argument of why a certain thing on your cover letter and resume is of value. And they may accept that. They may say, oh, that, has a certain logic. I personally don't have that experience. Maybe I'm a technical recruiter and I have been in the role, but I don't have that. Now you're telling me that really gives you an edge. Now, I can't verify that one way or another. I haven't worked with anyone who has that exact thing. So I don't know. Now, sometimes people may accept that argument that you make, the whatever case you make. Other times they say, no, I don't see it that way. And, they don't believe it provides the value that it claim it does. And, I mean, you're going to encounter that kind of uncertainty. Sometimes you will be able to convince them. Sometimes you won't be able to, for right or for wrong, And so when it comes to what recommendation would you have, that's where it gets a bit tricky, because depending on what industry, what type of recruiters you're dealing with, what the conventions are in that region or that industry or, whatever, or that particular organization, like you're talking about internal recruiters, external recruiters. If the company's looking for change, it'll probably look externally. If they're looking for status quo, they'll look internally. You don't know like what's driving some of these decisions as a candidate. That's all obfuscated from you. So it's almost like you just take your best guess and run with it.
Yeah, it's a good kind of position to put out there and to question. And I think Abby makes a great point that you put your best foot forward and you communicate how your skills and experience do fit, and you try to educate the recruiter on your skills and experience and how it is suitable. But you're right. At the same time, somebody might turn around and say, I don't see it, and I don't get it, and I'm not convinced, and I'm not persuaded, no matter how much we try to shout and scream and demonstrate it on our applications. And I suppose my question on that would be, when you're working with candidates and when you're giving people advice, at what point do you say, well, if someone doesn't appreciate and understand the value you can bring the way you've demonstrated as best as possible, at what point do you say, maybe this isn't a good fit if you don't get what I'm bringing to the table? The same as if you owned a 5-star restaurant, a fine dining restaurant, and somebody came to your restaurant and said, I'm looking for a McDonald's. I'm looking for a cheap meal. And you said, yeah, well, I need to explain to you, this is the best food in town. You got to come here.
Sorry, that's a great way to do a great example. I want to, before you move on, I want to capitalize on that. Okay, so you've got a restaurant. Let's say you want to hire a chef or something, right? Now, one candidate says, I apprenticed in Paris, France, to some of the best restaurants, high-level restaurants they had. People come from all over the world to study at those restaurants and learn their techniques. So I can bring that to this restaurant in New York, right? And then you get another candidate that says, well, I come from the Midwest, from a greasy spoon, kind of burger joint, whatever, Now, okay, it might not be, gourmet sort of high level thing, but I know the people, and I know people that want, the sort of common people that are the backbone of your clientele. I know you have aspirations to do like very highbrow stuff, but I know this crowd and I know what they like, and I can bring all that wealth of experience to what you do here. Now, as a recruiter, you have to decide between these two candidates. Now, what's the criteria for making that decision? I don't think there is. I would say it's just a total crapshoot. One recruiter will hire candidate A, one recruiter will hire candidate B, and I would put to you that for a candidate, it's impossible to know what situation they would be walking into. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, I've recently watched Ratatouille with my 3-year-old, and this is what it sounds like. No one's going to hire a rat to do cooking in this fine dining restaurant, and they're going to be looking for the people who have all of the background experience. But if we got to give this person a chance, look what they can do to the industry and the restaurant. And so it's all about presenting how you are going to be able to help the organization with the skills that you have. Now, I kind of want to back up a little bit, because one of the things that we're kind of dancing around is the fact that this is like a human-centered process.
Yes.
So the interview process, the application process, while it is somewhat automated with our ATS systems and scorings and things like that, there's a human element where the person is making some choices and decisions, and we have no control over what that other person is going to decide. So exactly what Ronan was saying was, if I'm going to apply to a position, put my heart and soul into my application documents, and they don't see the value, then it's probably not a good fit for me. If the recruiter at the very first touch point of having an interaction with this organization as an employee doesn't see my value, then that might not be the opportunity for me.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I actually like that you've pointed that out. Now, here would be what's the question is forming in my mind. We've talked about like ATS systems and like that initial filter. And then we've also talked about, like, as you say, Abby, the human element where people like really consider you as an individual and listen to your customized arguments about special things on your resume and make a case for them. Now, here's the question. There's quite a bit of difference in how an ATS system decides your fate and how a human that you're meeting face to face decides your fate. Should you include all that like human individualistic stuff on your original application where it's going to be most likely sent to an ATS system, or should you tailor that part of the process to like a more generic thing that it might be looking for standard things like Ronan said, like keywords and things like this, and save all the individualistic stuff for like, say, the interview when you're in front of like a human? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, should you sort of use the more specialized approach?
I think you do both, which is not answering your question in a clear way. It would be really nice to say, do the specialized for the interview and do the generic for the application. But there's going to be a human involved in the process eventually. And with the applicant tracking systems that I've worked with, the recruiter sets up the applicant tracking system to filter and sort for the things that I'm looking for first. And so it's automating my process initially, and then I'm doing like a final review before I decide who I might call for screenings or who I might send to the hiring manager. So while there is, I think someone could make an argument to do just the standard process, I'm going to eventually take a look at it as a recruiter. And if it is just boring, monotonous, I can't tell what makes you special, I'm going to move on to this person who has put in some more effort and specialization into their application package.
Yeah, well said. I that's a great point. I would just repeat you if I said it, so I think you've already nailed it there, Abby. The other thing I would say is the ATS doesn't watch videos, right? So if anyone includes a video introduction in their application, which almost nobody does, so if you do it, you will stand out. The ATS cannot watch that, but the human can and will, and they'll make an emotional decision based on that. So that's the other point.
I would recommend, like, since you brought that up, I would recommend that. I think that's like anything you can do to sort of outmaneuver, go around things. That's more my approach. I don't know if you guys take the same approach. It's like, instead of just doing the brute force way and trying to outcompete everyone on the same sort of thing, I would try and find a way of just going around it and not having to do that.
Like imagine 200 applications have a CV and cover letter attached, and one of them has a link to an introduction to Bill and Abby. Wouldn't you be a little bit interested to see what that 1 minute introduction is?
Yeah, I agree.
At the same time, 200 applicants, 2 of them have those videos. Those 2 with the videos also have to score high enough to get initially seen by a recruiter. So there's like a game we're playing when it comes to, standardization to meet the applicant tracking while also standing out from the crowd. So that's where, like, our view from a, candidate perspective is reviewing the job posting to make sure that I meet the minimum qualifications and the preferred qualifications, maybe not all of them, but probably 50% or more. Then I'm going to spend my time applying to this role. And then I might go above and beyond and say my chances of getting seen are higher because I have, all of the minimums and at least 50% of the preferreds.
Makes sense.
It is an interesting process because there's no guarantee. Someone could work with Ronan and me as career coaches. They could work with you, Bill, and we would do all the things that we've said have worked for other people, and it might not work for this one person. And that is what makes this such a frustrating process too, is that there's no like secret code to get the job.
I agree. Like, I've seen that within one industry. Within one industry, you'll get like one organization, we have these values. We believe in hiring young people, and like really maybe exploiting them, but giving them a chance, whereas their competitor, we don't hire young people. We hire experienced people that have been around the block several times, people that have seen it all. That's what we value, So if you're a young person and you say like, I don't have 30 years experience. I got 2 years experience, but I have a master's degree in this. And the company goes like, master's degree? What the hell's that? I've never even heard of that. I'm sorry, 2 years experience, nah, no dice. You go to the other company and say, wow, you got 2 years experience. Nobody here has 2 years experience. They were all hired right out of school. You're like going to be our most valuable person, and it just total different values. And this is within like one tiny little microcosm, So what would a candidate who doesn't see any of how these decisions get made? It's like, how would they know what to do on their cover letter? Like, what would you emphasize? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really, I know I'm not really pointing to anyone towards any solutions. I'm just pointing out questions, but this is kind of like the process that everyone's up against, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult because you can do everything right and somebody can do everything right and they're just a little bit more suitable for the job. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done your applications really well. It doesn't mean that you don't have a ton of value. It just means that someone else is just a little bit more suitable, or somebody guessed that they would be a little bit more suitable than you, even if you are more suitable. Or there's a relation or a friend or a brother or a sister or someone in the company that they know, and that just put them slightly ahead of you. I think in terms of the cover letters, the cover letter is a nice expression of interest, and it really gives you an opportunity to say things that you wouldn't normally say in a CV, to bring an extra layer of authenticity to it. And the beauty about that is it's very original, right? So whenever you're original, whenever you're really raw, whenever you're authentic, you can really connect with them on a different level and maybe say things that would be a little bit more personal. And I think that's beautiful, because then you can see, well, this is a real human, this person stands out, and this is someone I want to get to know. You can add in little nuggets from
metaphors. You
can add in little nuggets from your childhood, or how you have been following the company for 20 years, or how you use one of their products every day, and anything that builds that extra connection. So I think it's very powerful tool in that way. And then some people will always say, yeah, but do I really need to do it? Like, yeah, we know you want the answer to be no, but but I always say to clients, even if you don't need to, even if they don't read it, it's still a good idea that you write it, because then you'll know the answers to the questions they're going to ask you in the interview, which is, why do you want to work for us and why should we choose you?
Yep.
Yeah, it does seem to boil down to that at the end of the day, doesn't it? Like you have to have clear answers for basic questions like that. Like, do you meet the requirements? What can you bring? And what have you done? Like, what are your accomplishments? How can you make us believe that you have the skills necessary by illustrating with accomplishments or something? I mean, that kind of stuff.
Well, and I've had a couple of people comment on my videos before, say things like, well, why do we even need the interview process? Like, if I have the qualifications to do the job, why don't you just hire me? And that's like, a lot of people actually probably have the qualifications to do the job.
I would respond with, how much time do you have?
Yeah. And it's like one of those situations where it is up to the recruiter to make a lot of decisions about who's going to be a good fit for the role based off of all these other factors. And the amount of effort that I put into my application will help the recruiter make that decision. If I'm not going to submit a cover letter and it's not required, but someone else does choose to submit a cover letter, to me as a recruiter, that just demonstrates that the person who submitted the cover letter is that much more eager to have this opportunity.
That's a great point, Abby. I think a lot of people should pay attention to what you just said.
Yeah.
Because it signals your enthusiasm and that you care and that you're doing something that might be considered possibly optional. You're doing it.
Yep. And organizations, like, we're going to divert a little bit, but I promise this all will make sense. Employee engagement. Employees who are more engaged with the work that they're doing, they feel more valued, they feel more motivated, they have higher results in the organizations they're working for. Employee engagement is really the definition of discretionary effort. Are they willing to go above and beyond what their basic job duties are? And if they are, then there's like this benefits that they get from, going above and beyond. It's not a requirement. Everyone has these like basic requirements as a part of their performance evaluations, etc. But employee engagement is defined by that level of discretionary effort, how much more I'm willing to go above and beyond. So I can demonstrate that at the very first application process by including a video about why I'm so excited to work here, by including a cover letter. And so that's ultimately what is going to be the tell for the recruiter of who's going to be the best fit for this position. I might even hire someone or choose to hire someone who has less experience, but is a better fit for the organization because the experience can be taught on the job. So there's like all these other things that come into play. And if I, as an applicant, am going to demonstrate that I'm eager and excited and enthusiastic about this role, that I'm teachable and open and adaptable and flexible, and here's all my like extra fluff that I put together, that is going to be way more appealing to a recruiter than one CV that has all of the keywords in it and no extra fluff.
I think that's great. Because I agree, not in terms of this process, like, going through ATS and, resume filling. I agree with that in a more organic way. Like when you're a manager, you're a hiring manager that's like doing final interviews with different candidates, like what you're like as a person. Like we started off talking about like, why do we even need an interview? Right. So like, okay, if you don't understand that, like, to me, that signals a little bit of entitlement. You think that just because you have a qualifications, that's all it's required. It's not all it's required. You might be qualified, but if you can't work with anyone, or you're the most like insufferable, off-putting person to deal with on a daily basis, it's a deal breaker. Like, I don't care if you're smarter than Albert Einstein. It's like, no dice. Nobody wants to have you in their work group. You know what I'm saying? So yes, people's skills do matter. You can't be insufferable. You can't be off-putting. If you say offensive things constantly, that's a deal breaker. So that's at the most basic level what the interview is for, right? And what you said, Abby, is like, how you're looking for that person and what they can bring. I mean, that's the other part of it. That stuff is what's supremely important. That's all I want to say. I think that was probably the most valuable part of this live stream so far, is what you just said.
Yeah, well,
for candidates.
It's frustrating when you feel like you're putting in tens of or hundreds of applications and you're not getting any responses back. It probably has to do with your process with creating your documents to apply to these jobs. And so that's why I think it's valuable to have an outsider's perspective on your application process. And you can pay for a career coach like Ronan or me, or you could use free resources. Like I've mentioned this in almost every stream that we've done, Bill. In the United States, we have workforce centers, which are local free resources for people to go in and get their resumes reviewed by career coaches who work for them. They can engage in upskilling events. They can do a lot of different things that are free resources to help you really hone your your application package, so that something's not working. Let's diagnose what that is. And then you can put, that more intentional effort to the jobs that are going to be a better fit for you, that not only you can do from like a qualifications position, but also from a like culture fit position.
Yeah, I agree. There are resources that can help you with that. The thing that I talk about the most is I know a lot of people don't recommend this, but just if you got a friend or family member, I mean, that's better than nothing. Just do mock interviews with them. And it's very hard to be objective about your close friends or family members, but I mean, it's better than doing this in a vacuum, and just.
Or even a camera on your phone or your laptop, right? There's a nice tip where if you find the standard questions that are going to be asked and some behavioral questions that are going to be asked, you prepare your answers and then you record them into the camera. You can first listen back to the audio without looking at the video, so you get a real clear idea of how you sound, right? Just focusing on the sound. Then you can turn off the audio and just watch the video back, so you can look for your body language and your presentation. And then you can watch them both together, and you get you can watch them together. So you get 3 different perspectives on your interview answers. And that gives you the most honest feedback you could get.
Most people hate the way they sound when you first hear yourself, when you first see yourself, right? Everybody is, they do that thing where they figure, okay, I'm going to get a couple of garbage bags and then throw up in them, or jump out the window, but you've got to resist the urge, right? Because, yes, you're going to sound weird, but you only sound weird to you. You don't sound weird to other people, just because you're not used to hearing your own voice or something, from that perspective. But yeah, I agree. Like even if you can't get a friend or family member, just get, like Ronan says, just, film yourself if you can on your phone or something, and just get that perspective. You just do it. If you don't know what you're going to get out of it, just do it anyway. And you will find tons of, pointers and tips that you never realized about yourself, so that they'll help you perform better in interviews. Definitely.
Have either of you ever tried doing interviews with ChatGPT or any AI where it will respond to your responses?
You mean like type it in, or you mean like
no? It will talk back to you.
Oh, you guys are more high tech than me. I'm old, so I'll look into that. No, I haven't done that, but I will look into that.
Yeah, and I've seen also like several videos of that, happening where people will use ChatGPT to practice that, and I think that's another great option. I think the difference, and again, I have the unpaid version of ChatGPT. I try to use the services in the way that I think most of the people who will use them will. So I don't know exactly how that works with the paid version, but I think the difference between like using ChatGPT or another AI program is if it doesn't record your session. I think what's really valuable, and I can see a couple people already putting in the chat that like they can't stand the sound of their own voice, all of these things. I think that even if you can like just get over the fact of listening to yourself, having the like recorded data to review of how you sound, your nonverbal body language, which ChatGPT doesn't see because it's just a system that's interacting with the like input through the screen, or through your keyboard or voice recording. And then like listening to them kind of all together. That is such good advice that people don't want to take because it is so raw and it really
a little too real. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so hard. And at the same time,
handle it.
Be such a confidence builder because you recognize like, oh, I'm actually answering these questions really well, or my body language is not too awkward. And it can be really beneficial for them from those purposes. And then at the same time, I might be saying, wow, I really ramble. Like I got to cut this, 3 minutes shorter than what my response is. My stories make no sense. Like it's so valuable to get that
I'm
data.
an idiot, yeah.
Okay, don't be too harsh on yourselves, folks. I'm sure.
That's like the self-talk.
And I've never, just so you guys know, the rumors are not, I've never rambled ever in my life.
Yeah, none of us have. None of us have. We're all perfect speakers.
That's right. Yeah. Use this opportunity to try it. If you're doing the visual ChatGPT, use this opportunity to try out an interesting new accent too while you're at it. Your Pepe Le Pew, you know, and turn on the shine and then see how effective that is. If you can fool ChatGPT, that you might be onto something.
Maybe even use like a video filter where you become a cat. You know, there you go. So much better.
If that's how you see yourself, this is the thing for you. If this is the kind of thing you like, this is the thing for you. Right on.
Yeah.
But no, I think I've never actually used that, so that's a good thing. I'll keep talking over you until, you know.
It's okay. We'll get there eventually. But I think using ChatGPT to even like analyze or respond to our interview responses is a great resource that people can tap into that feels a little bit less biased. You know, it's not my mom or my, you know, spouse or partner, you know, someone that I'm close to who, yeah.
Can I ask, when you're recommending that your clients or that your viewers do interview prep with, let's say, a relation, family member, you know, a friend, and so on, do you encourage them to get to tell the other person how to respond? Like, do you encourage them to say, you know, look, could you give me constructive feedback and could you give me positive feedback, or do you just kind of say, look, just go off and do the best prep you can, or kind of how do you talk them through that?
Well, there's for me, there's two primary purposes. So number one, it's to get you, okay, like before you would do this, presumably people would do their homework, learn what they're going to, how they're going to respond to standard questions, you know, memorize their behavioral based answers, like their STAR answers, the stories they're going to use. So they've done that individual work. When I recommend people start doing a mock interview with another person, the primary value is to see, can you recall that information? Number one, like when you're not expecting the question, when someone just asks a question and you've got to answer now, can you recall it in a real situation? And secondly, can you do it under, like, what do you call it? Like where there's social pressure, you know, there's another person staring at you and you feel nervous and a little bit stressed and uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone. Most people, they find their mind goes blank. They can't remember basic stuff that when they were rehearsing on their own, it was a no-brainer. But now when someone's staring at them and they have to recall this information, they find they can't. So that's more where the value is, I think. And then getting feedback from them on what the other person thought, like how you did and any advice they would have. That's kind of secondary, especially if you're dealing with like family members and stuff. I don't know if I would take my family members' advice about anything to do with what they think of me. But, you know, I think most people, it's not like you're dealing with like a professional interviewing coach where they would be able to give you much better advice. This is just like your brother or something, you know, what do they know? So it's primarily just internally how you perform under that kind of pressure. At least that's my take on it.
And I would agree. I, wrote some notes just so that I wouldn't forget kind of what you had asked originally, Ronan. And I think that it comes down to, like, you have two different outcomes that you're looking for. One is just practice responding to questions. And a lot of time, like, that's not an interview. A typical interview is not how we normally engage in conversation, which is why they can be so difficult. Yeah. So responding to questions, kind of just like these rapid fire questions coming at you without having additional conversation, just that practice can be really valuable. And at the same time, we should be looking for some additional feedback. Usually what I recommend to people that I work with is I ask them to keep track of how long their responses are, because that can be really valuable. If my response is 15 seconds because it's like 5 words, that's too short. If my response is 5 minutes, that's probably too long. Mm-hmm. So keep track of how long your questions or your responses to questions are. Then I would recommend, if they're interacting with someone else, family member, friend, colleague, whoever it might be, who's acting as an interviewer, prep them with some things that you would like to know ahead of time. That way, they're not giving you unsolicited advice that you don't want or need. And hopefully you can take something with that. And I think that having a piece of feedback that will help you grow is great. having some positive feedback is really nice because it helps you kind of reduce some of that anxiety. And then some feedback on their thoughts with your responses to the questions.
Yeah.
If they can't follow your responses, then that's a big red flag because there's someone who probably knows you and maybe knows some of this history. So I think that that's like one area that I usually recommend asking for feedback is, did it, and what I'll also do, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, which is not what I would do in a normal interview. But I would give them like the CAR method or the STAR method and say, this is how I'm going to try to answer these questions. Let me know if you feel like I missed a piece of this, or like I could have been more specific in this area. Because the people I'm interacting with probably don't have any experience as interviewers either. And so giving them a little bit of structure will hopefully help them provide me with more helpful feedback.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. What was I going to say? You said something really good, like towards the end, that I wanted to follow up on. And of course, my mind went blank. How's that? I was just talking about that. No, but as far as, okay, I know what I wanted to say, or I know something I wanted to say. That was more to Ronan's point earlier. You were asking about like, what's the value for interviewing, with like doing a mock interview. One aspect of being in a face-to-face interview is, Abby, you were talking about like rambling, babbling, a response that goes on for 5 minutes. That's too long. Sort of on the basic level is if an interviewer asks a candidate a question and the candidate feels pressure to start talking, and usually you guys have done, interviews, you can tell me, but usually when the candidate starts to wrap up the answer, then the token passes to the interviewer. The interview there and then responds and says, okay, and then they ask another question. Now, if you don't get that, if you just get like the candidate talking until they stop, and you get an awkward silence, a lot of people, they feel this real social pressure to keep talking. And that can be when they get enough rope to hang themselves, because the more they keep talking, it's bad for a variety of reasons. They go off script, they start to waffle and, get less coherent. I wouldn't know anything about that. And, you have to be able to say like, this is my response and I'm done. Now it's back to you. I have nothing further to say. Like just basic sort of interview techniques like that. That's the kind of stuff that you would never really rehearse by yourself. You can't rehearse by yourself. You have to have another person, preferably someone that you don't really feel super comfortable with. You go to a panel interview, you got like 5 people staring you down that you don't know, and you're on their turf, and, it's like, how do you rehearse for that? You have to put yourself in these very uncomfortable sort of situations and, know how to behave and then practice behaving like that.
What about warming them up, warming the interviewer up and cooling them down the same way as you would with exercise or, so if it's introducing them to the story by telling them about the situation, the task, that's the introduction. And then when you're coming to the end, typically when we come to the end of any sort of story, we tend to slow down and we tend to maybe emphasize 1 or 2 more points, and then I'm finished.
That's interesting. That's great stuff, Ronan.
So it's like that natural, like as I slow down, or as I, like if you don't like slowing down or slowing down the cadence of your voice, you can say that the last thing I would say, or the most important takeaway I have, and that's kind of like a punctuation of the story to take it to the very end. So by saying things like finally, or the last thing I would say, or the biggest takeaway, or my biggest learning from this experience was, and then I'm finished.
Yeah. I think that's a great piece of advice. And I think the other thing that you could do with that is like reiterate the question with your final, answer. So, nice. And that's why I think this is my biggest weakness, period. And put a nice bow on that response and then be okay with the silence. 6 seconds seems to be the theme with the timing along with this, but humans in general are uncomfortable with more than 6 seconds of silence. And so what I recommend is when people are feeling anxious and worried about that silence, and I've talked about this in a couple of my videos, and I don't know if we've mentioned it in a live stream before, but we have a pressure point in our hand just right here on either side. And if you just give a little squeeze right here in that meaty part between your thumb and your forefinger, that's a good way to like recenter and focus yourself. And it's, you keep your hands in your lap. It can be really covert. No one's going to know that you're giving your hand a little squeeze. But if you are feeling nervous,
does it have to be right, like that skin between your, like the webbing, whatever you call it, between your fingers?
And so it's not like I don't know if I can get close enough.
If you have webbed fingers, you've got an advantage.
It's like in the meat.
Oh, I see. Okay,
muscle.
Yeah. So not the bone, but like the meat of your hand. Yeah.
The muscle that's like kind of connecting between those.
It has to be your hand. You're going to stick your hands into your pockets and start pinching things.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. Can I, like, not to totally go off topic or anything, but can I ask both of you, do you guys ever, like, I'm not a coach. I'm not an interview coach. I don't offer services to coach people, but you guys both do. Do you ever coach people for stress interviews? Like, is that still a thing that is out there that, people regularly encounter?
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what that is? That's where that's where the interviewer intentionally makes the candidate uncomfortable to see their response under that kind of situation.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I've come across that, or someone
Really?
said,
Okay.
I want to do a stress interview. I know people have been put in positions where they feel stressed or uncomfortable, or that the interviewer was just playing confrontational, and they're trying to test the candidate for whatever reason, whether it be they think it's a good strategy or they're having a bad day. I'm not sure which it is, but we always come back to the question of, is that the sort of organization, or is that the culture that you like, and are they values that you would share? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so. Like, oh, by the way, just everybody watching, there is a chat, there's a comment section. So wherever you are watching this from, I think we're streaming it on a couple of different channels there. Get in the comments and let us know if you have any questions, and we can see those and we will respond. So, by the way, hello to Oceana and Darth and Ara, if you say that. This is where I get to show how I can't pronounce names, and then everybody gets offended. But ask your questions, and we will take those. We'll be happy to take those. No, I've in my experience, like, I've been in stress interviews when I was, like, not at the management level, when I was like just like sort of a professional, and then at the management level, I've been through panel stress interviews a couple of times, and so for me, this was more of a thing because I had it done to me, and I remember in the past people would talk more about them, but you don't really hear too much. So maybe it's not done. I'm getting the impression from you guys. It's not really.
What were those jobs? What were those jobs you were going for?
Well, they were engineering type jobs, and I got more. I got two, or at least one, when I was going for professional jobs, and then I got at least two for management level stuff.
But it wasn't a technical interview.
Well, they're for technical type job. The professional job is like a technical type job, but you do obviously have to talk about how you interact with people and all that kind of stuff at the interview. But no, to give you an example, it's like they would say on your resume, like, oh, they'd find fault with it in front of you, and to get a reaction, they'd say, no, it doesn't look like you're qualified. No, I don't think much of that accomplishment, and things like this. And then you would say, yeah, but I do that. And they'd say, yeah, but who would want that?
Well, why did you invite me to this interview?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what you want to say, right? It's like, then what the hell am I doing here, right?
Well, I know this is probably not standard advice, but I would, if they're confrontational, I would respond in a confrontational way, because that's the energy that they brought to it. So if they are saying, who would want that, and you don't meet our requirements, well, why did you invite me here to this interview? What are we doing? Are we wasting each other's time, or are we going to talk business?
You could put your hands under the table and then flip it over, and then roll up your sleeves and, like, come on. Yeah. Well, no, the conventional wisdom was you're not supposed to respond to that kind of provocation, because, like, imagine if this was like, public relations type work you had to do, or that was a component of your role. you can't let people get a rise out of you. You have to be able to respond in a professional manner. And despite people making very aggravating statements and things
but what if it's for a contract negotiation position, or it's for a position that has like a lot of confrontation, like a large construction site where there's daily confrontation and there's a lot of challenges there? You need to know that whoever you're hiring is going to be able to hold their own and not be intimidated by somebody else saying, disputable or
absolutely. I've never encountered them test that in an interview, because I imagine a construction site manager would not respond with a very diplomatic, sort of professional thing. They would sort of match the level of offensiveness and accordingly. But you wouldn't do, at least in my experience, I've never seen that in an interview. But I've never worked in construction, so I don't know. If anyone in the chat has worked in construction, let
I'm
us
interested.
know.
Well, yeah. I've given my perspective. Like one of my perspectives is to keep rapport. When you're in an interview, you're keeping rapport. So if the conversation is friendly, if it's open, then you're keeping rapport. You're in that zone with that other person wherever they are. You're trying to go there and build that trust and build that connection. And if they're speaking a harsh language, you can only keep rapport by speaking a harsh language, not by being submissive.
If you walk into a job interview and they're dropping F-bombs at you, is that your cue to respond in kind? There's a question.
Well, I would respond professionally, but I would match their I would match their level of intensity. If I wanted the job, if that was totally outside my culture or my value set, then I would just say, this is outside. This is a different culture. I totally misunderstood this. My apologies. All the best hiring a suitable applicant.
But that's in. I don't know about you guys, but that for me is the best benefit you can get from like a mock interview. And I know that, like, at least in my hometown, there's one HR company that does provide that. You go and they'll work with like managers and executives and stuff, and they'll do, for a lot of money, they'll do like, mock interviews, and they'll include stuff like stress interviews. Like if you're doing a press conference and, somebody says something very aggravating or, some kind of insult, unprofessional kind of thing. And you just snap like a twig, obviously that's not okay. And you're not the person for the role. Right. So, but they coach you through that. And I remember somebody telling me, it's like when they say that, artificially force yourself to smile. It's like, you may say that, but blah, blah, blah. And all these techniques that I'm no good at, that
you can prepare people. You can prepare people for those stress interviews or a PR style interview or someone who's highly confrontational, but you have to build them up slowly first. Yes. Would be my perspective is you have to get all the standard answers right, then build up responses to potentially red flag questions, let's call them, which can be very difficult. And then you can also have some stock answers, and you can hear all the professional artists and sports stars. They do this. They have the stock set of answers that cover all the other type of unknown or uncertain questions that may come. And they'll say, well, at the end of the day, we did our best, or, we did the best with the tools we had. And you can see this in political sphere as well. They'll have stock answers that they use to cover off all those other questions. So I think you can do it, but you don't start there. You start with the easy ramp up.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is when it comes to a stress interview, I don't imagine that would be the first interview. And if it is, then to me, that's a red flag. I think in the world of work today, organizations are recognizing that they need the employees just as much as the employees potentially need them. And so to burn these bridges, to demoralize someone, to be ruthless and super abrasive in the very first interview is probably going to turn most of the candidates off. So what they need to do is build that rapport, understand how they're going to be a better fit for the culture as a whole and for the job itself. And then maybe they're going to have more of a real world experience as an interview. Maybe they have to give a presentation or they have to talk on a controversial topic. And as a part of that, might have some of those stress questions. But I can't imagine that an organization would recommend starting off with that type of interview as their first interaction with a potential employee.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's definitely not the standard thing. Yeah. But I do firmly believe that it's still does have its place, and it is still done, maybe unofficially, but it is still done. What's the point of, like, if you're hiring an outside salesperson, what's the point of going to the nth degree to verify their skills and how, they're in various different areas, if you first walk into the room and somebody says something like, well, you're late or something like that, and then the person gets like really offended, and like that's kind of a red flag. Like, you're not going to be very good, in your role if you can't handle like a simple thing like that. So I mean, I think it's still done, but maybe unofficially, and maybe not by recruiters, more hiring managers or something.
I've heard it go into role play. That sort of situation go into role plays quite a lot, where it would be like, okay, I'm going to be the high value client, and you're going to try sell me this private jet, right? Or you're going to try sell me software, and I'm going to be the client, and you're going to have to do a needs analysis. You're going to have to dig deep and find out what the obstacles are. You're going to have to talk about pricing and start to do like intro level negotiation. And then I'm going to give you some obstacles. I'm going to maybe confront you with a few things, but it wouldn't be an aggressive confrontation. It'd be more just like a challenge or a disagreement in a professional way. And they role play it that way to see how the person actually responds to that situation.
I remember, like, just to kind of, once again, go even further afield here, just to illustrate what I was talking about earlier. I remember there was a company years ago, like I was for a management role. They flew me across the country, and I got in this room, and there were like, 4 people, and one person was the chief financial officer. They were like from an accounting background, and I remember I don't remember what we talked about. I don't remember the role, but it was something to do with my role was nothing to do with accounting or finance, none in that area. But they had this person present, and they chimed in and they asked me questions about budgets. Do you have a budget? How do you lay out your budget? And I was trying to explain, well, in the last role, I worked very closely with the owner of the company, and they had this kind of credo that they don't make very, very specific budgets all the time for every department. They believe in a bit of flexibility. So if there is an opportunity, you might have to spend a bit of money if there's an opportunity, but then you're conservative the rest of that. And they absolutely snapped, like hearing this. They said, no, that's absolutely not true. You can't run a company like that, blah, 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 blah. And then they were visibly upset. They took me to task. They told me I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, like all this kind of stuff. And I couldn't figure out if that was like a tactic to kind of see what my response would be, or that was genuine and they just didn't, they took offense to what I said or something. Maybe that was their whole job or something. Yeah. And I was saying it wasn't necessary. But things like this, and I've been in those situations where people do that intentionally. It's not organic. It's a calculated, crafted thing.
Did you
to
want
make
to work?
You uncomfortable to see
Did
how
you want to
you
work
behave. Here's a question back at you, Ronan. If you have one person doing that in an interview, but 3 people that aren't and that are very charming, and you click with them very, very well and have a good rapport, what would you think? You'd be kind of conflicted. It's like, I like these people, but that person's kind of scary. It depends on what the compensation is, et cetera. So, you know what I mean? Like it's not a clear thing that makes you want to run away.
I would want to run away. And I would say that would be a red flag. And I think part of it would be watching what the other people how they were reacting. If they were, like straight faced, no affect, that would be concerning to me. I think no matter what, I would probably run away, just as like a blanket statement. If people are not reacting to that, that tells me that this is probably like normal anticipated behavior. And that's not the kind of situation that I want to be in. If people are like taken aback and like surprised this is happening, it would also tell me that it's probably this person is reactive and explosive, and the people on the interview panel might not know that about them, but it's like kind of showing their true colors. So I would not want to work for an organization like that. Because many times organizations will keep high performers, even though they're toxic. And so I imagine that if I were to work with that person, I probably would be, walking on eggshells most of the time. I will probably be like worried about their responses. And then that might cause me some anxiety outside of work. And then I'm going to have burnout much sooner. So there's all these things that could come from working with someone who shows up and behaves in that way. And the fact that they're still with the organization would be a red flag to me. So I'm as a candidate, I'm making a lot of assumptions about that. And I think a lot of people these days would probably make the same assumptions. And I think people also justify working in those types of environments if it's, one of the FANG organizations or like a coveted position. But ultimately it will lead to burnout, and ultimately it will lead to like poor quality mental health and all these other things that I don't think people.
Oh, definitely for some people, yes. But I mean, as I think you guys know, there are some industries where it's a little gruff. Like if you want to work in, petroleum industry, and you want to work in the railroads, you want to work in the steel industry. And I mean, there's very, very much a very gruff sort of, I don't know what you call it, but very gritty kind of culture where people keep it real, and, people don't have the most refined manners when they interact with each other. It's just a normal thing. And if you want to work in that environment, you need to be able to handle that. Even if the majority of employees don't behave that way, you might have a few in any group that do, and that's just industry wide. And so you have to be able to, tolerate that and work with it. So, but you can instantly, I mean, what I've experienced, I don't know if this is a rule, but while we're talking about this, one thing to instantly neutralize it is after the interview, have one, like the main person, the most senior person there, come and talk to the candidate just one-on-one informally and say like, hey, like don't mind that person, like I think you did really well, and like a few encouraging things. And then instantly most people will change their opinion. They'll be like, it's not such a bad place. Like, the top person supports me. So, it seems, it's very hot and cold kind of thing. But the point I wanted to make is that in my experience, these are very real, especially if you're in an industry like that. And they do it intentionally to see how you handle an emotionally charged situation, because some people don't handle it well. And if it makes you want to run screaming from it, then obviously it's a good thing that revealed that it would not be a good fit, despite perhaps what's on your resume or, your background. They see that for themselves, Well,
and I think there's a difference between being able to handle difficult personalities and being abused. And being abused might be feel like a very strong way to put it, but in most organizations where that type of behavior is tolerated, if that's going to be coming out during an interview, that's very concerning to me. Now, if it's prepped and they say, we're going to, have this role play where we're going to have someone pretend to, really question your judgment and things like that, I think that is very different, because it still shows how you think on your feet, because you're not necessarily anticipating what will be said or what will be questioned. But if it comes out of left field, if it's someone who is supposed to be a part of the interview process and they're reacting that way, I think that's very concerning.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never worked in like automobile sales, but I've heard, and I've had friends and other people, associates, tell me horror stories about their interactions, and how people, like Ronan, you mentioned like negotiation and this kind of stuff. And I mean, yes, you can get very contentious situations in the negotiation. People get, their emotions involved, and all this kind of, especially if you're, I don't know, you're locked in an exchange for a couple of hours and it's going back and forth and it's frustrating. And, the other person is saying things that you don't agree with. And, and some people just snap, and in some industries that's kind of more tolerated. I think real estate might be a little bit like that too. People's tempers run really high and you get all kinds of things going on.
Politics, maybe.
One, honestly, any job with other people.
I'm going to not go there.
I feel like there's any job where another person could be involved gives you the potential for dealing with someone who is hard to work with or hard to interact with. I've put together a couple of trainings on how to handle difficult situations with customers. So, I think the pandemic specifically has kind of created this really strange response from people towards other people. In a variety of different contexts, but customer service, we can go with that. And I think there is you can respond to people in a very courageous, direct way without being confrontational or without being
definitely, yeah,
too abrasive. And I think that I think shying away from any uncomfortable situation is not the answer. And at the same time, if that shows up in an interview, it is a red flag.
Yeah, I agree. As a general rule for most jobs, yes. If someone started behaving this way, it would probably be a real red flag. I see there's some questions. I don't know if you guys want to take some questions. Ara says, hello, Abby, Bill, and Ronan, watching from Africa, Cameroon. I am from Cameroon. Thank you for this. It's so helpful. Well, thank you, Ara. It's a pleasure to have you here. My question, please. In a case where you left a company, you know what? I can put this on the screen, can't I? Mm-hmm. There we go. My question, please. In a case where you left a company because of bad management, if asked why you did quit your job, do you have to tell the whole truth, or how can one answer professionally? Thanks. Who wants to take this?
I have a video on this topic, which I'm going to find right now. Go. Like, why are you leaving? Why did you quit?
Go watch Abby's video on this, everybody. Not just yet, but when we're done.
I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. Ronan, if you have a similar video, please feel free to share that too. And I think
I've got one somewhere. I don't know where it is.
I think what would be kind of everybody's answer to this?
Yeah, I think for me, you keep it professional. Bad management is your opinion. And at the same time, they got into that position somehow. Maybe it was that they were so bad that they just get, promoted, so they'd be moved out of their current situation. And other times, maybe they are really good at what they do. And they're, so you don't necessarily want to blame it on bad management. My recommendation is to just talk about how you're looking for a different opportunity. You're needing some additional professional growth and development, that you're, have had some changes in your life and you're looking to move into this industry. There's a different way to answer the question that still makes your response true without saying, I hated my boss or the management was awful, so I'm out of here. There's you can tiptoe around it, but I wouldn't directly say like leadership was awful, so I had to leave.
Yeah. I think that's very solid advice. And I would echo that. I think you want to focus on the positive things. You want to focus on what you learned, the relationships you built, the achievements you had in the role, the skills you got a chance to develop, and any experience that you were able to gain while you were there. If you were there for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you moved on, that's a very normal thing to do. If you were there for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks, then maybe the answer needs a slightly different explanation. If it's a situation where the interviewer is looking for, let's say you're there only like 3 months, they might push you and they might say, well, it must have been something. So what was it? In that case, where you really feel like you're pushed to give an answer, and you cannot just frame it positively, you might have to say that you just had a difference of values. You had a different understanding of what was more important. And that's something that you've learned more about yourself and that you're going to take going forward. And it has informed you even more about what's important for you and what you want in your next role. So you're using it as a learning experience. Basically, you're always trying to stay positive. You're always trying to take your learnings. You want to avoid at all costs saying anything negative about them.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. In the absence of other questions, I guess I'll answer. I was hesitant to answer this because I would give a very diplomatic answer, a very pleasant diplomatic answer, but between you guys and everybody watching, I have a very cynical perspective about questions like this. First of all, I believe that it's absolutely none of these people's business what you did with some other company or did not do, why you did something with them, or why. Like if they said, what's your relationship like with your mother? Like, do you feel any obligation to give full and complete information on that? What if they said, like, I need you to tell me your credit card number. What is your credit card number? There's no obligation to answer it truthfully or to give any answer. You have it's not even directly relevant to the purpose of the job interview. It's almost like when they say, how much money did you make in your last position? This other company that you worked for before, how much did they pay you? So they're asking you about an interaction between you and a third party, right? Now, you can make all kinds of logical arguments why, oh yeah, we need to know this for insert reason, but it is none of their business. So I would give a sort of token default answer. And I agree with Ronan that you wouldn't say anything negative, but I think I would go one step beyond what Ronan said. I would not say, oh, it was a learning experience, suggesting that it did not work out or it went wrong in some way, or it was anything less than perfect. I would just say I was ready to do more, and then I would leave it at that. And then we have that situation where there's an awkward silence because I'm not going to say any more than that,
And I do agree. It's none of their business. And I think a better way, and not that this necessarily applies to the question, but it's from an interviewer's perspective, a better question is, why do you want to work for us? What about us is causing you to want to leave your previous job is kind of what that question gets at. And it's way more positive. It's focused on, thinking forward into the future. And I think that, why are you leaving your last job is purely from a place of curiosity and not super helpful when it comes to making a decision on if this person should be hired or not hired.
Yeah. If the company is nervous that there might be something that the candidate isn't telling them, like maybe they were causing conflict, or they were disturbing the business, or they were not showing up on time. Basically, they were doing things that were not creating trust in the company and building a collaborative culture. Then how can the candidate reassure the company that it actually wasn't them? They were doing an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, but really it was factors outside their hands, like bad management, that caused them to move on. So I wonder, like, how do you teach people to reassure the company that they've done everything well?
I don't think you can. That's the problem, because, what's working against you is that principle of past behavior predicts future behavior. So if it didn't work out with that company and you're revealing this, at the end of the day, you have a bit of a stain on your record now, because you've suggested that it did not go well. It did not work out with a previous role. And I mean, what are you going to assume? You're going to assume the candidate's a higher risk candidate now, having heard that. So for that reason, I just wouldn't get into, I wouldn't engage on things like that. And I wouldn't advise anyone to engage on it. You know what I mean? On the one hand, you want to be accommodating and you want to be pleasant and you want to answer questions fully. But on the other hand, you want to keep some cards close to your chest. If it's going to make you look bad, even though you're not a bad person, it may be perceived as being bad because people don't know the whole story. So you would not put yourself in that position. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, I think this question also comes up a lot, at least with the clients that I'm working with who have been laid off. There's even like this, if I've been laid off, many times people will start to feel like they are not good enough, and they have this like negative self-talk.
Inferiority complex. Yeah.
Yes. And so then they're worried that the person that they're going to be interviewing with will feel like they're not good enough for this role. And so they're wanting to over explain the situation, which actually can do more damage than not. And so I think that if you are put in a position where you have been asked this type of question that feels uncomfortable, keeping it as positive as possible and giving just what needs to be said is a good rule to kind of abide by, so that you don't talk yourself into having them back out of wanting to hire you.
Yeah, I agree. The more you talk, like we mentioned earlier, the more you talk, it can be a real liability, and you have to be able to control what you say and not just ramble on and on and on. Definitely. I'm going to put this one up on the screen. So Dan Phil says, hi all. When we talk about handling conflicts, we normally are told we found a compromise. But most of the times, for me at least, you can't really reach a compromise because the other side is wrong. Yeah, exactly. 1 + 1 = 2. Now let's kick it around and get everyone's perspective. Is that true? Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But at the same time, Dan, as maybe you can appreciate, when you do work with several people, if people have a difference of opinion, even if you are right, let's pretend that you are absolutely right and they are absolutely wrong, but they don't see it that way. How would you handle it? Right? That's the question. That's the larger question here. What do you guys think?
Yeah, great point. How would you handle it? Like, let's say if your manager is wrong, but they think they're right. Or let's say your manager thinks they're right and you think you're right, and you just disagree fundamentally on these two things. So I think you have to talk about how you look at data, how you look at the evidence or the research that backs up your opinion, that you talk about your experience. Basically, you give evidence, data, any information you can to support your case. And you ask them for the same in a nice, polite, and professional way, data, evidence, or experience to support their case. But at the end of the day, you got to go with the hierarchy. You got to go with the manager. Once you've presented your case and they know your side, you still have to go with them, or else you're going to cause bigger conflict.
Yeah, and I put a link to a book that I love, which is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And one of the habits is thinking win-win, which is recognizing that we have, like, it's about all of our interactions with people and kind of what we've learned and how we're going to learn and grow from those situations. And so when we're asked about these questions, like, tell me about a time you handled a conflict with so-and-so, it doesn't necessarily have to be that the conflict was resolved and everyone is happy. It can also be about what you've learned when it comes to conflict resolution and like coming to a common ground or relationships with other people. And so when you are thinking about the results achieved as a part of this, like, what are they trying to get to when it comes to this question? It might just be, I recognize that I steamroll people and that I think that my way is the right way and that I don't back down from that. That doesn't work for everyone. So I've learned to be a little bit more empathetic, and I've learned to listen first. And I've learned to do these things. That's what they're looking for, is like that you are self-aware, that you've learned to, from your experiences, that there's room for growth and development, not necessarily that you've handled the situation the right way or the wrong way. And so I put the link to this book in the chat because I think it can help with our mindset, with how we approach conflict. Primarily because I had that like reaction to your very final part of that comment, which was the other side is wrong. They might not be wrong from their perspective. It might only be from like your perspective. And even if it is, not complying with policy, like there are things that we can kind of rely back on for that. And so I think the heart of that type of question is more, what did you learn? How are you applying that to your future conflicts? Things like that.
So Dan, if you're listening, let me paint you a little picture here. Imagine a situation where you're the boss of a team of 10 people, and on that team you have one person. Let's call them employee A, and they believe that they're right. And then you have another employee also on the team, employee B. They take a complete opposite position to employee A, and they are equally adamant that they are right. Now, it can't be both. This is a thing where you either do one thing or another. You can't do both. So you have to figure this out. Now, you're in charge. Now, how would you handle this? Okay. Would you say, I order all of you to let's do what employee A says? In that case, maybe employee B is likely to quit or sabotage or complain or, not work with others because they're so adamant that they're right and they feel that their suggestion should be adopted. Or do you side with employee B, right? What most managers will do is they'll say, like, they'll go to employee A. They say, like, look, I understand that your position has merits. I understand you feel very strongly about this. They'll say the same thing to employee B, and they'll say, like, listen, let's do a compromise. That way, you're not being steamrolled here. We agree with you. You can save face by not being overruled, right? And same with employee B. Now, the boss may agree that employee A is right and employee B is wrong, but the consequences of telling employee B that you're wrong when they believe that they're right very, very strongly, all that's going to achieve is that employee B will disengage. They will be resentful. They may start looking for other jobs and leave. If they're a talented employee, this is going to be a problem, right? And this type of situation comes up all the time. And if every time that happens, you lose an employee, that's not really sustainable. So, there's no absolutes in a workplace. Someone may be technically right, but if everybody else believes with all their heart that they're wrong, it's not going to go well. You know what I'm saying? It's what people believe, unfortunately, that affect the dynamics of how things turn out. So that's the reality of it. If you were in charge, that's what you would find.
What a lot of leaders do, as you know, is build consensus by starting with the small building blocks and trying to get everyone around common principles that they agree with. And this is often done by, listening to the whole group to see what everyone agrees on, relating the team back or reorientating or realigning the team with the shared values of the company. Because at a high level, everyone has agreed with the values of the company when they're coming on board. They've been orientated to those. And so when you start there, you've got this common ground, you've got this consensus to go from. The other thing is when if there are tensions or if conflict does get raised, really at our core, we all want to be listened to. We all want to be understood. We all want to feel like we're heard. And so I've always found listening to people very carefully is a great way to calm tensions, to de-escalate tension, and to give everyone a chance. So I can speak about my personal principle, which is empathize to solve the unsolvable. So some things are unsolvable, and the only thing we can do in those situations is empathize. Like if somebody is very upset at a death of somebody close to them, we cannot solve that, but we can empathize and we can listen. So I think that helps to calm things and de-escalate tension.
Yeah.
Remind ourselves that we're not, when it comes to conflicts, a lot of the times what causes that is us assuming the worst in other people, like thinking that they're choosing to do this to make our lives more miserable or to make our reputation go down or, whatever that might look like. And so trying to take a step back and asking ourselves, like, why would a reasonable person do this? Even though I might have this like previous history with them and I'm making these assumptions about why they're behaving in this way, is that truly what's at play here? And many times we'll find that people's behaviors are fully focused on what's going on with their own lens and they're not thinking outside of themselves. And it's not about us at all. And so having that empathy, sitting down, listening to someone, asking questions from this place of curiosity to get more data will always be a better approach than like, you're wrong, we're moving on.
Yeah. The other principle, Dan, if you're still here, is that maybe you already know this, but human beings do not like being told they're wrong. We have an emotional reaction when that's what happens in almost any way, shape, or form, whether it's direct, whether it's very subtle. We don't like it. Even when we're wrong, we don't like being told we're wrong. When someone says, you're wrong and they mean it, you will get your back up. You will get defensive. You will get angry. You'll get frustrated on some level. And so that's the problem, right? Now, the other thing is that there are all kinds of advanced techniques to build consensus. You can, make the person see the issue. You can ask, questions about, like to try and get them to realize maybe some of the flaws in their thinking, blah, blah, blah. But practically, when you encounter this on a day-to-day basis, there's no time to go into like those kind of exercises and those kind of operations for every little time that someone has a disagreement with someone else about something. It's just not practical. So that's why we have to compromise. So you would say like, look, okay, let's do a halfway thing between person A and person B, just so we can get through this. That way, both people are somewhat content. And maybe the boss would talk to employee A and employee B and say like, look, your suggestions are valid. I get you. I feel you. I agree with you. We're going to do this, which is a partial thing that you wanted. Okay. And that way everybody can get through it. You make the entity flow. Nobody gets upset. and it's business as usual. You can keep going. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to do these kind of compromises, not because it's reflective of the reality, the technical realities of what's right and what's wrong, but because you're dealing with people who have egos and they have opinions, and people are usually wrong about a lot of things. And that's just a reality of the world. And we have to find ways of working with them in workplace type situations. That's just the reality of it. A lot of technical people have issues with these concepts. I'm a technical person. I understand. It can be very hard to back down when you believe you're right about something and other people are technically wrong. But you can't have an impasse in a work type situation for any amount of time. That's why they want to test you on, can you compromise? Can you communicate with people and handle conflict? A lot of technical people sometimes feel that stuff is kind of a waste of time or it's not important, but it's very important. You will find, I'm sure. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, and I think conflict, I put a couple things in the chat just as like anecdotes. So when it comes to conflict usually arises when one or more of the following things are present: high emotions, differing opinions, and high stakes. And those high stakes can be perceived or actual high stakes. That is like differing opinions, high emotions, and stakes. Like when we're thinking about those things are happening to us all of the time, just because we as individuals are so different from all the people around us. So then the next piece of that is how I define conflict. Conflict is the gap that occurs, or conflict is what occurs when there is a gap between what we want and what we end up experiencing. And so if I look at it in this way, I can approach someone by asking them questions and having this sense of curiosity of, what were you expecting? What were you wanting? They're very emotional about something. Okay, what has caused this emotion, presentation in you? What stakes do you think, what's at stake here for us? What's different about your opinion than my opinion? Like, just asking some questions can really shed light on a lot of these things that can then say, oh, we had a complete miscommunication. Maybe someone was left off of an email, or, maybe someone engaged in some sort of body language behavior that culturally doesn't match with what I'm used to. Like, there's a lot of things that can come that just is pure miscommunication. And so when it comes to conflict, looping it back to interviewing, we need to understand what the interviewer is hoping to get out of our response. If they're asking about conflict, is it conflict with a customer, where a customer comes to us angry? We've probably all interacted with someone who was, engaging in some sort of service with us that maybe isn't happy. And we, maybe it's even my children or a spouse or partner or sibling. So what are they hoping to get out of our response to this type of question? Are they wanting to know how we handle conflict? Are they wanting to know how we think about conflict? Are they wanting to know if I'm more conflict averse or if I'm ready to jump into approaching conflict? And as Bill had mentioned earlier, past behavior predicts future behavior. So we're wanting to share a story of how we've engaged in conflict resolution of some sort that has resulted in a positive outcome, even if it isn't a resolution of the conflict.
Yeah. I'm going to put my psychology hat on. Psychology one. I need to get like a dunce cap or something, and it's going to write my psychology 101 or something and no. Okay. Number one, I got to collect my thoughts here. Number one, most of the time in these type of situations, the reason people get upset is because they feel they are not being listened to. Right? Now that's a form of, like I was saying, it's a form of being told you're wrong, right? If you believe you're right, like, okay, guys, we should do this. And everyone says, no, that's not really going to work. Right? And you say, no, seriously, we should do this. I'm going to make my case for it. And then they go, no. You don't feel like you're listened to. Now let's pretend hypothetically that the boss came and said, okay, listen, we're not going to do your thing. We're going to do this other suggestion. However, I want you to know that I think your solution, what you were pushing for, was actually quite elegant. And I think that there was a lot of merits of doing that. Now, I would love to be able to take that approach, and maybe in the future we might be able to, but I don't think that, we're really set up, unfortunately, to do that. Otherwise, I would really entertain, like that, handling it that way, and I just want you to know that, I'm glad that you spoke up and you said all these things, like words to that effect, right? If someone came to you after the fact, now, how would you feel about it? You might be disappointed that people didn't take your suggestion, but you might be much more okay with it under those conditions, right? You might sort of go along with it and not have any kind of personal issues or conflicts with anybody. So really, that's kind of the heart of the matter. It's not like, like what do you care about this employer and what approach they take? The only reason you care is because you feel that they're not listening. And in so doing, it signals that they don't think you don't have a lot of value. You don't know what you're talking about. And that threatens you and that makes you upset. It's alarming finding this out about, the people I work with don't think that I'm very, very smart or something. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's kind of the dynamics of what's going on with this kind of stuff. So that forms how people usually handle this. It's all about feelings and emotions, all very touchy-feely and much less technical. That's what usually governs how these things are handled. It's silly, perhaps, but it's practical when you're dealing with emotional beings like we are that get offended, get upset very easily, and then disengage and leave and sabotage others. It's those are the kinds of things that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, and Dan added to the chat. He said, I'm also as a technical person, it's unnerving for me when things move along against my suggestions, mostly because of bureaucracy in big companies. I guess it's inner conflict.
Yeah. So for me, that sounds like this is a classic issue. You've got the technical person, which is trying to grow, develop, push a product or service forward and deliver a result, and always trying to make it better. And they're super results orientated. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got, let's say, the people doing managing. They're trying to manage policies, procedures, compliance, controls, all that sort of stuff. And often their priority is to actually slow things down and stop things, because that's how they can keep control over things. See, you often have this dynamic in organizations where you've got this push-pull of the technical people trying to get more things done at a higher level, faster, and you've got the people managing the process trying to slow things down. So it really comes down to, how do you sort of appreciate their perspective, but still get the work done? And what does the company prioritize more? If you get an organization like a pharmaceutical company, where there's so much compliance, there's so much bureaucracy, there's so much red tape, and it's directly related to people's health, it's very difficult to move past the compliance, the health and safety people, and to deliver more.
Damn health and safety people.
So it's one of those difficult things that technical people have to kind of, they find themselves often just reorientating their values and just accepting, if I'm going to be in this game, I'm just going to have to accept that it's going to be a little bit slower. Compared to, if you're a technical person in a software company, you can, as Zuckerberg says, move fast and break things, because the downside is not really that bad. It's just a software glitch or a bug. But it's a common challenge, Dan. So I hope that gives you some solace.
Yeah.
You know what helps? Having been in the different roles to see why things are done. That really helps, because first of all, I was the head of health and safety for a company. So the role of health and safety is you're always yanking the leash. You're always putting on the brakes. Everybody else wants to rush ahead and get things done. They want to, be very creative, very, very constructive, very productive. And you're the ones going, whoa, 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 not so fast. Right. And that's a very challenging role, to always be the person that's like the sole voice of dissent. Everybody wants to move forward and you're pulling them back. The other thing is that a lot of technical people, of which I am one, and I started out as, you got very strong opinions about what should be done and why it should be done. And you don't understand, the people upstairs that, with their bureaucracy holding you back. The other thing is that people, you don't have to be upstairs. You could be a peer, but you're just in a different department. You see why things are done the way they're done, because technical people, you might be in one area of the company, but maybe you don't understand, say, sales. You've never been to the sales department. Nobody has cross-trained you. Now, if maybe your employer has a program where 2 weeks out of the year, they rotate you and you now have to work in the sales department, you have to shadow some salespeople and see what they do, go out and talk to customers with them. Then when you come back, you go, oh, I now see why we do things, or why we're told to do things this way. It's because of that problem they're encountering there, right? You know what I'm saying? Once you see that, then a lot of the stuff falls into place. And I know about you guys, like Ronan and Abby, if I believe that everybody has their kind of breaking point there. You can sort of subordinate your will to the will of an organization, but at some point you say, no, this is ridiculous. There might be reasons for this, but this is just stupid. You know, you're not taking all my suggestions. You're not letting me do what I can do. You know, you're holding me back too much. I'm done, kind of thing. I think everyone can get to a breaking point where they're not willing to be put through it anymore. Maybe that happens in pharmaceuticals. I don't know, because of what you said, Roman.
When I think with the technical positions and technical people, it's very easy to think of things as black and white.
Yeah.
I'm right, you're wrong. I'm wrong, you're right type thing. But the world is a lot of gray. And so, just think about like the number 3. How many ways is there for us to, like, through addition and subtraction and multiplication, to get to the answer 3? I might say, well, 2 plus 1 obviously is the only way we do it. But someone else might say, well, what about 6 minus 3? That gets us 3 too. Not even crossing my radar. And so when it comes to engaging in conflict, the first step is really to start from this place of curiosity. Like, well, tell me why you feel this way. What's your experience that has gotten us to this place? And most people feel like they're right because their experience has shaped that result. And so we need to have just a little bit of flexibility and openness. And it's so hard, especially when you're like trained and you feel like you have education that backs the way you've done it, and you've had a personal experience when it's worked well this way, but worked not so well the other way. And when we're interacting with people, we just need to have that flexibility and curiosity. I
think that they're great points. Flexibility and curiosity. Every conversation's a bit easier with both of those, for sure. I love them. I suppose the one last point I would make before I wrap up the call and call it a night here in Europe.
Yeah, we're running over.
Yeah. We're close to 11 p.m. in Europe, so it's almost bedtime here. But the one last thing I'd say is, like, when you are talking to somebody about these difficult issues, is finding the right moment, right? We all have moments when we're particularly tense or stressed. And then we have moments when maybe we're more relaxed or we're calmer. So choosing your moment, as well as having those strategies that you both mentioned very well, I think doing that is really important. So that'd be my last kind of tip is, find somebody when they're in as good a emotional state as possible, and then choose the moment to maybe talk about some of those and asking permission, right? Can we have a quick chat about this?
I think that is a perfect bow to put on our conversation, Ronan.
There we go. And that is how you finish a YouTube stream.
There you go. Listen, this was great. I thought the reason why I went on so long is because I had such a great time, and I thought what you guys said was like really, really cool. So I think these are getting better. The more we do,
thanks so much.
The more it's flowing and everything. So yeah, and thanks to all the people that participated in the comments. You guys are awesome. Thank you for sending us some really good questions. We kind of strayed from the initial topic of this call, but I felt that we went into some good areas. We will be back. I will be back certainly next week. And then I'm hoping that in December, we'll be able to just throw even more people onto this call. So I'm really hoping that that you guys will both join me again in the future to do this. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Ronan. Now check out Ronan's channel. Okay. Ronan's channel is called Career Coach Ronan Kennedy. There is a link to it in the description box. At least if you're watching this on my channel, there's a link to the description in the description box. to Ronan's channel. I see Abby is putting those in the comments. That's great. Check out Abby's channel. Abby's channel is called Life Work Balance. She's got some great videos about how to do resumes, cover letters, interviews, all that kind of stuff. So check those out. Lots of experience here, lots of talent when it comes to the role of the recruiter and that kind of stuff. And anything you guys want to say, but just as a sign off?
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, and really enjoyed chatting with you both.
Yes, it was great to meet you, Ronan, and hopefully we can all continue this conversation in a new live stream in the future.
Definitely. Yeah. Awesome.
I just hope we have enough to talk about.
I don't think there's any danger of that. Awesome. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you guys really soon.
Thanks so much. Bye now.